It's funny, actually. When I left on this journey, I thought traveling the old way was traveling without a motor. But what I just learned from my friends in the Mi'kmaq community is that the old way isn't my method of travel. It's what I connect with when I travel. And they told me with every stroke of the paddle in the water to say, the water is sacred, the water is sacred. And with every step on the earth is sacred, the earth is sacred. That's the old way. Traveling with respect and reverence for what sustains life.
That's filmmaker and explorer Dianne Whelan, whose documentary 500 Days in the Wild about her incredible journey on the Great Trail across Canada, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Arctic and Pacific, is having its premiere this week at the Whistler International Film Festival. She's our guest on Explore, a Canadian Geographic podcast. Welcome to all you explorers out there, armchair and in motion. I'm your host, David McGuffin. We love a great journey here on Explore, and Dianne Whelan went on a doozy. Over 6 years, she did the entire Great Trail, the longest trail in the world, 24,000 kilometers across Canada by bike, on foot, and in canoe, from sea to sea to sea. A filmmaker by profession, she documented her journey along the way. The result is an incredibly inspiring and beautifully shot film, 500 Days in the Wild. And I should mention that Dianne was supported early on with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society Expedition Grant. Before we get to our conversation, a quick reminder that you can get a subscription to Canada's best magazine, like the very best of all, the award-winning Canadian Geographic, for just $28.50 a year. That gets you 6 print issues and full online digital access. A great deal for a quality publication. So go to canadiangeographic.ca/subscribe. It makes a great gift for the holidays. And now, on to our adventure across Canada with Dianne Whelan. Dianne Whelan, welcome to the Explore podcast.
Oh, thank you. So happy to be here.
So I'm always fascinated when I'm talking to people who've done incredible things like you have, like where that germ of exploration came from. Where was home? What were your folks up to? Like, where did this come from, do you think?
Well, my mother's Acadian from New Brunswick, a little Acadian village called Saint-Damien, and her ancestry goes back to the 1600s. And my father is a Newfoundlander with a few generations there in Newfoundland, but prior to that, obviously Ireland. So, I mean, I guess, at some level, there's a nomadic gene in all of us when, the very fact that we're alive, it means you can trace your ancestry back to the beginning of time, but we all have amnesia about that. But, so, my mom said, here's the, all I could tell you is I think I was just born with it because I was born in Toronto. My parents left and came west a couple years later when I was like 3 years old, and we lived, surrounded by trees. But even in Toronto, when I was born in May, and by that first winter, I was only like 6 months old. And the only way they could get me to be happy would be to wrap me up and put me in this baby carriage. And even if it was like minus 20 or minus 30 outside, just roll me out there and leave me there. And once you got me into a park, you just couldn't get me away. And, what was great about being born in the 60s was like no one knew better, and you had this amazing amount of freedom. And even as a 5-year-old, I was getting my lessons from, watching tadpoles turn into frogs. And I've always just felt a real sense of peace and being at home, surrounded by big trees and the little critters too, like I said, the frogs and the salamanders. And those were my first teachers. And you think about what happens with a frog when you watch a tadpole egg become a tadpole, which then becomes a frog. What your little 5-year-old brain is actually watching is transmutation. It's a very powerful thing, right? Yeah. And it's all right there out in nature. So something that she got me. They tried to, my parents are Catholic, and I have great respect for people and their religions, but nature had me by the age of 5. And for me, it's just, that's where I feel that there's a divine. That's where I feel like those are my cathedrals, the old trees and being out there in nature.
What part of Toronto was that? Like, were there
I
ravines or
think
where
it
were
was
you?
like right downtown Toronto. Like, back in the 60s, that's a lot of Maritimers would go there for work. And there was a maritime club where, Newfoundlanders could meet people from PEI and Nova Scotia. They're kind of cliquey and they looked out for each other. And so my parents met there, and I think I was the reason why they got married back then.
Nice. There you go.
But anyway, they,
Connecting people right from the start,
right
right?
from the start. But they're, both are Maritimers, and they didn't want what they grew up with. But it just goes to show you might not be like your parents, but I think my spirit, if I had a chance to see who my ancestors were, I'm pretty sure I come by it honestly enough. And I
Hmm.
feel like I've always been a storyteller. I mean, the fact that I'm using film now or photography or words, I feel like that's just always been a part of who I am because, I feel like maybe I probably did it like near a fire in an older time with a drum in my hand or something, whether it was the Irish descent or the Celtic or whatever. It feels old in me and it feels very authentic. I feel really lucky in my life that I've been able to live what I would consider to be a pretty authentic life. Lots of mistakes, but authentic mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
Yeah, no, it's peaks and valleys all the way through for everybody, though, isn't it? Really?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, so then the Great Trail, it's like fairly recent phenomenon in Canada, and it's clearly
Hmm.
it got your attention. 24,000 kilometers, I think, of trail. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
long way, Deanne. So
It's a lot. Yeah,
why? I guess the question will be why.
yeah. Well, lots of reasons. I mean, first of all, I found myself in a place in my life where the life that I had built had come to an end. The relationship, my marriage had ended, and a few years after that, my dog died. So the things that would normally keep you kind of anchored were gone, and so I was sad about that. But I also saw opportunity in that. I saw opportunity to do something that I wouldn't normally be able to do, and that would be to kind of leave my life for a while. So there was that. I had already made a film on Everest and up in the high Arctic. So when they started calling it the longest trail in the world, that was kind of intriguing to me as well, and knowing that it had never been done. And then also, they were calling it, I mean, I get it. I mean, it's like I said, like I do think Canada's a wonderful country and I love living here and I'm a proud Canadian. But the idea of building it just to celebrate 150 years, I thought there was an opportunity for some rebranding.
Hmm. Hmm.
I just wanted to bring a different sensibility to it. I wanted to bring this idea of like, yeah, just celebrating a story that started a lot longer, and still celebrate Canada, but also celebrate everybody that came before Canada was Canada too, and basically respect the ancestors of this land. So, yeah, all of those things just came together for me, and I didn't, it didn't require a lot, like financially. I mean, I'm an independent filmmaker. I didn't have any grants when I left. I didn't have any financing. I didn't have any supporter. Like, I had people supporting me. I had other indie filmmakers who kindly were helping me out when they could. And I was showed a lot of kindness. I say the currency of 500 days in the wild was human kindness for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how everything happened. It wasn't because I was waving money around. There was none. But it was an idea, and anyway, it was just one step at a time, and somehow 6 years goes by, and the
Yeah.
journey got completed. But the why, I mean, again, it was when you want to do something with this with your life, a whole bunch of things come together to kind of make it make sense. It has to be so the opportunity. The desire also to do some self work, 50 years old, call it a midlife crisis or whatever you want, but a time of self reflection just to really make sure, have I gone off course here? Like, if I only have 5 years left or 10 years left or 20, like, I don't know. We don't get born with an expiry date. And I think every once in a while, just diving in and checking out, make sure you're on the right path for you. And I
Hmm.
was ready for that kind of self reflection. I liked the idea of working out every day. I liked the idea of being in a lot of outdoors a lot. And I liked the idea of being able to film every day. I owned my gear. So, I was just doing the things that I love to do and just kind of bringing it all together. So I guess the question would be, why not?
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It made more sense than a lot of other realities that I I don't know about sitting in traffic for 2 hours every day getting to work in a building. All due respect, for some people that brings happiness. For me, it's just about finding what works for you. And this really just brought all my passions together, and gave me a focus too. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I always say too, I like to choose film projects where even if things go sideways and nothing, let's say you don't get the funding and the film never gets released and whatever, maybe you can't complete it because you get injured, but you've had this experience. Like, I got to be out there and live this. I fell in love with canoeing. It's so many amazing things, happened. And I never knew what they were going to be when I woke up in the morning. So, what an amazing way to live, actually. And, I consider myself really lucky. And, giving myself that experience was one of the best gifts I've given myself yet,
Yeah. And now sharing it with all of us. So thank you. And so it was bike and walking and paddling, and which at first I was surprised, but then I thought, of course, it's Canada. there's going to be a canoe involved, right?
Canoe, yeah. My favorite part by far was the paddling.
Yeah, that stretch you did up through the Northwest Territories up to the Arctic Ocean, was just beautiful. Like, it really. Oh,
thank you.
And I've done some paddling in that area, sort of further west, but it's such striking and so solitary too up there. So
it was really very much so. Yeah, it was relationship boot camp for Louisa and I, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you had a real partner on board. Yeah. So you started out in Newfoundland, and that was on bike, which I sensed wasn't your favorite.
No, I should have hiked that part right up to the last minute. I was going to hike it. But I had set my bike ahead because we're trying to move gear along. And then when I got there and I saw the beginning, I'm like, oh my God, it's this like easy gravel path, bike. And then I get out past New St. John's and it's like, oh, no, it's like that crush rock that they build rail lines on. Oh my God. But whatever, it's all good. Like it was on the job training.
There's you being a professional filmmaker. There's some great like up close spill shots too, of just head over heels. Like, I was happy to see you switch to foot. When
I think we all were. Woof. Okay.
The other thing that surprised me, and so I assumed when you did this over 5 years that the reason was to avoid winter.
6 years.
But 6 years, let's not.
6 years in 1 month, actually,
Exactly. Let's not discount with, But you didn't avoid winter. You went head on into winter through New Brunswick at one point, and through Northern Ontario. So was that a conscious decision, or was that just this was the time you had available, or what was the?
Well, originally I always thought that I would be out there all the time. Like, that was, and in some ways, I did come on and off the trail, right? I was filming, and sometimes I stopped to rest for a couple of days. I stopped to rest for 2 months and, in the middle of the country and at different times. So for me, it was like what I walked away from was my home, and I was a nomadic person until I would return home. And, the trail was where most of the time I would be at, but like, it was very responsive. Like, I didn't have a plan. So all I ever really I looked at the map, but then I would just focus on what was before me. Right. And if I got there, then I'd kind of focus on that next thing and then that next thing. And, I actually really loved winter. I knew there's danger in winter, but I much prefer winter than getting caught in that rainstorm I got caught in. Like, really, thankfully for the hunters, our biggest threat out there is hypothermia and water. When you get wet, it's very difficult to deal with while it's still wet. So, I swear, like, the most important thing I brought out there was a hot water bottle. Like, do not go winter camping without one. Don't go camping, period, without one. It's just your best friend. But it can keep you warm. It's like a tea cozy when it's inside your sleeping bag. And I love winter because it's quiet out there. You can see exactly what animals you're sharing your space with because they leave their prints on the snow. So do humans. So, you have a real good sense of, what you're sharing your space with. It's a lot brighter. More depth of field in the winter out there. And just when you're working out, the feeling of like that cool air on your skin and on your face. And I really loved winter camping. It was, like I said, more the spring and the fall that scared me more than winter did, and it was the rains and the wet.
Yeah.
Um,
There's some
yeah.
good bug scenes in that too. Speaking of spring.
Yeah. Well, that's the psychological part.
That is.
Right?
So talk to me about you. You were just mentioning some of the people you ran into, but I mean, what was it would seem like it would be a very solitary thing to do this, but you did run into people. And what was that experience like as you went cross country?
Oh, it was amazing. I mean, yeah, like one of the things I'm most proud of in this film is that, like I said, no, it didn't matter what people's politics were. It didn't matter if you're left wing, right wing. It just everyone was kind to me. And of course, when you watch the news, you think the whole world is full of sociopaths. How can you not? I mean, like really. But the reality is, when I was out there in a very vulnerable state, and even when I was afraid and I didn't trust people, all I was shown was human kindness. And I realize it's not always that way, but the reality is 99% of the time it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always luck involved in everything. It is about who you meet, and for sure, it's just like meeting the wrong bear is like meeting the wrong human, basically. But I didn't, and that really changed. I didn't go out there with that kind of trust,
Yeah.
So I have it more now.
Yeah.
And
because people were putting you up for the night. Like there's a scene where a guy picks up your glasses that you dropped on the road and hands them over to you. I'm like, wow.
Right? Like that's what I'm talking about. Like over and over and over again, you're forced to look at your own stereotypes. You're forced to look at your own, all of it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, like, all I was shown was human kindness. And in this film, everybody can find somebody they can relate to that was the hero at some point of time on my journey, or the heroine, in the sense that everybody. And I think it's one of the things I love about the film. And I hope it lands that way in terms of what I call the medicine of the art, right, which is the music, but also, just being reminded that for all our differences, really, just when we can show each other some kindness, we all kind of get along. And so it gave me hope. I went in there a little bit more cynical than I'm feeling now. I definitely have a lot more hope. I've met a lot of people, and what's amazing is we've got like some of my Indigenous friends I met out there are all coming out here for the opening, and we really are all coming together. It wasn't just like it's a circle, not a line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just learning about what reconciliation is. Like I said to you before, like it can become this political thing. Like, what does it mean? Like what? And it's like this academic thing almost, right? But what it is kinship. It's friendship, and just hopefully seeing some of that. I'm not saying my way is the way. That was just my journey and my reconciliation journey, which is about making friends, and through those friendships, learning different ways of seeing things. And then you can actually move on from that. You can build on that, right? And I loved, Cecilia's two-eyed way of seeing. I mean, there was a lot of things that I share in that film that brought me hope, and I hope they land for other people in the same way. And just a new story, a different way. I mean, that's what we share is a story, and we get to rewrite that if we want. So, just all of it, just the kindness of everybody. And I think is the thing that lands the most, and that how we all have the capacity to be healers if we're that way. If it's showing each other human kindness, then that's something we can all do. We all have the capacity for that.
Yeah. And you seem to have tapped into like First Nations, especially communities all the way across the country. And the welcomes you got there were, pretty heartwarming. And, I just sort of think, given what's gone on here for the last 500 years or whatever, did that surprise you, or how did you take that?
Wow, yeah, it definitely surprised me. It moved me deeply and profoundly. And, but, it's also those the people that get remembered tend to walk that path, right? It's that path of grace and that path of forgiveness. You know, you look at Mandela, right? When he got out of prison, he had every reason in the world to be angry, but he didn't. He forgave everybody, and I mean, those are the stories that last. And so, was I surprised? Yes, but in hindsight, no. I mean, it's just the grace. We're in this together, you know, and so those that see the way to peace are going to be remembered because that's what that's the continuity of life. And so anyway, but again, I feel a lot of that was as a result of some people I met, and people would just kind of set those things up as I went along. And but yeah,
at the start of your trip, you even before you went, I guess you were Haida Gwaii and met an elder who gave you an eagle feather, right? And I think did you smudged every day at the start of your day with that?
Yeah, just about. Yeah. Well, he gave it to me as a gift and told me to do it for grounding. My dog just entered the podcast. Cedar. There you go.
There we go.
Oh,
that's okay. So we were talking about smudging.
Smudging, yeah. So Vern, once
so you were smudging every day.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when he gifted me that feather, I didn't think. I mean, I was very touched, and I was like, oh, God, it's kind of hard to carry this feather. It's very delicate in this kind of non-delicate journey, right? I didn't realize it was going to shape my whole trip.
How so?
But that's, in the sense that what you carry in your heart shapes your journey. So I really, truly believe that because I carried that feather, even if I wasn't talking about it, that's why those other moments happened and unfolded on my journey. It was shaped by the fact that I was carrying this feather and I was actually honoring it. But also, what a gift, right? Like, staying grounded is so important when you are out in nature. You have to be in the moment. You have to be aware of everything, the changing of the winds, what's happening in the sky, what's happening on the ground, what's happening around you. So something that I could use to help me stay grounded. And it did more than that. It also connected me to the landscape and to the waters in a different way. And also, once I got to Cape Breton, I was gifted the paddle that has the white eagle feather off it, and I always had that at the back of the canoe. And I think even just carrying that paddle opened up opportunity in communities. I also think because I was traveling alone and I wasn't like, although I'm so happy for my partners and it's being finished as a Paramount film, and I'm very, very, very lucky. Out there when I was traveling, as an independent filmmaker. So it was very much a journey not motivated by money, and they knew it. It was just motivated by heart, which is why I was invited into those spaces because, for a lot of Indigenous communities, when you walk that path as an artist, that is very honorable. That's an honorable path to walk. It's not about money. It's about spirit, and it's about heart, and it's about getting to know yourself. As I said, reveals what a mirror cannot. A lot of time out there. Get to know yourself.
Is there something about moving at that pace too that changes you, or
I think so.
I'm thinking more of paddling and canoeing. I mean, and walking as well.
Well, it's a resonance. Anytime you slow things down, But I think too resonance in terms of like how the animals changed for me as I spent time out there. My connections with butterflies and the dragonflies, and then how that evolves into large moose and bear and whatever, right? And I talk about it in the film. It's just this rebirth of excitement behind my camera, but also just learning how to see differently and be differently, and how that changed those moments. I think it created those moments. I think animals do read human resonance, and just that was a really big discovery for me.
It seems like there were a couple of hair-raising moments in that film. I mean, were there moments where you're like, Dee, this is too much?
Well, certainly the death of Julian and the death of Thomas were quite profound. They were, we had to deal with psychological fear at that time.
Hmm.
My partner definitely wanted to stop at one point, but wouldn't leave unless I left. And I knew that if I left, there was no going back. I mean, just financially getting myself back up there would have been like it's just a
Right.
really prohibitive, right?
Was it the kayaker who
Yeah,
drowned?
well, it was a kayaker that drowned behind us, and then a man in a canoe right ahead of us on the Mackenzie River that was grabbed from his tent at 3:30 in the morning and eaten by a grizzly bear.
Was he
And
French?
yeah, he was Julian.
So
Yeah.
my nephews were the first people on that scene. They were paddling up the Mackenzie just ahead
Whoa.
of you. Callum
Wow.
and
I
Keenan
heard.
McGuffin. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we were right behind.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
days
So they
behind.
walked into that scene and the woman was clearly distraught and
Of
she's like, we have
course.
to go after them. And they're looking at the blood and they're like, no, I don't think there's anything to go after. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they got the
Yeah.
police there. And yeah.
So that really
Yeah.
freaked Louise out, right?
Yeah. No,
And it
with
freaked me
good
out
reason. Yeah.
too. And for good reason. Except I'd been out there for so long that your fear threshold with these things has just been moderated slightly. But we also had a 12 gauge, which I never carried a gun on the entire journey until that paddle to the Arctic. And then we got our licenses and we carried a
Mm.
12 gauge. So at that point, it was no longer in the bottom of a bag, it was like, bring it out. Oh yeah, let's start practicing some shots at night and just like like deal with the fear, right? I mean, like just try to deal with this fear. But I didn't want to quit at those times. I had one moment where I wanted to quit at the end of 2019 though, when my mother, her aorta above her heart dissected and she had to be rushed into emergency surgery. And I was kind of touch and go there for a few weeks. And I got off the trail at that point. My partner came and got me off the trail in northern Alberta, and I went back and spent a couple of weeks sitting in a chair in a hospital at VGH with my mom. And I was just like looking at her going like, I just can't leave my mom, like she needs me here now. And you know but she got better after a few weeks, and she was still kind of weak but going home. And she basically just really just would have none of that. She's like, you got to go back out and finish what you started, because I know you and it will drive you crazy. And I'm okay, thank you for coming home, thank you for being here for me. And but you need to go back out there now. So but that was a hard one, because while I was out there I did lose friends did die. It happens at this age.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a cost to being away from your life for such a long time. And here's my parents going into their latter years, and I'm spent a good chunk of it away from them. So at that point, yeah, it was definitely, I had to wrestle within myself about what was the right thing to do. But she made it easy, because she just was like, I'm locking the door, you're not going, you're going, bye. So she made the decision for me. And I'm grateful to that, because I am really happy that I got a chance to finish it, and that both my parents were alive to be there to greet me, and knock on wood, they're both alive to be there at the world premiere on Friday. So that's a real blessing.
Yeah. So world premiere. I was impressed with the journey, and I'm impressed with the fact that the amount of footage you must have had to sort through
800
to put
hours.
that. Yeah,
That
800
was
hours.
insane.
Yeah,
It was the Mount Everest of edits. That's why, I mean, there's no solo about any of this. There's no solo
yeah,
that I finished this journey without hundreds of people to help me, and there's no solo in this film. Like, this is a film's collaborative. It takes a team. And my editor, Tanya Marignac, is amazing.
amazing. Yeah,
The way I make documentaries, I don't have scripts. We go in there bravely and we look at a pile of clay, and then we find the sculpture that's within the clay, and we let the story come out. It's kind of a verite way of making films. It's not an easier way, it's a harder way, and it's the way that I make them. And some editors run away screaming, and she did not. We did work with other editors who also helped us. That was the only way. We actually went through every minute of this footage, and the only way to do that was to work with a team of people. But my senior editors, Tanya, was
yeah.
amazing. And
So that
I
means
also
you were cutting to picture before scripting. Is that what you were doing then, or like what were you...
No, well, a lot of that narration that you heard, like I was constantly carrying my cell phone around out there, and I
Hmm.
wasn't, sometimes it was my backup camera, but more often than not, I was, a lot of times, well, the funny thing was, I didn't even think I'd be in my own film at first, which
Ah.
everybody finds really hilarious now, including myself. But so I was always pointing the camera elsewhere and talking from behind it. Like I was like, and occasionally would like film my reflection in a puddle or something. But I wasn't
Yeah.
exactly like doing any like la la la. And anyway, so what was really cool was we were able to go through like all of these like phone recordings and really
Yeah.
find these in situ recordings, and then use that as like lay that out, and then kind of be responsive around that. And that was our process, and it was great.
Wow.
A really
That's
good one.
amazing. Yeah.
Again, very labor intensive. That means listening to everything to find those moments that you want to carry forward in this way.
Yeah. No,
And I
really,
hope we
it
get to do
pays
a
off. Yeah.
series. Oh, good. I'm so glad. Like, very few people have seen this film, right, David? So
Oh,
this
good.
is,
I
you're
feel very
like my
privileged then.
audience.
Yeah.
Like, so, the fact, so you like the film, you love the film.
No, no, I loved it. No, and what I can tell
Okay.
you, what amazed me about it was, like, first I saw, okay, it's 2 hours, and I'm like, how are they going to get all this into 2 hours? And somehow
Right.
you really do. Like, you get a
Thank you.
real sense of the journey and the difficulty of the journey and the beauty of the places you go, and
Hmm.
it feels longer in a good way than 2 hours,
Okay,
if I
good.
can say it that way. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like
Thank
you've
you.
done a lot more of a journey than you think you possibly could. But yeah, no,
Oh, good.
it's stunning, and I encourage everyone.
Oh.
I mean, to go see it. Can you just describe to me that feeling when you ended your journey on Vancouver Island, and
Yeah,
what
that's
that
right.
moment as you
That
sort
final
of...
paddle.
Yeah.
Oh, I was overwhelmed. As you can see in the film, I'm bawling my eyes out. I mean, after spending so much time going through all communities, but Indigenous communities
Mm.
specifically, when COVID happened, there was no more going into any communities, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, which I mean, at that point, the part of the journey that stayed the same was connecting to the other 99.9% of life on Earth, which is
Yeah.
non-human.
Right.
So that part really kicked in, and that's why you see the real jump up too in some of the cinematography with the animals and stuff, because it's where I just really dove into. But so for a few days before I landed, I got a message asking if I wanted to follow traditional Coast Salish protocol when I landed on the beach, and I was, yeah, wow, sure, absolutely. And I was just given a little bit of instruction about what that would entail, which is staying in the canoe when you get to shore until you're greeted and invited to come to shore,
Mm.
and to say your name, and to talk about the journey you've been on, and to promise basically that you've come in peace,
Mm.
and that you're not going to eat all the blackberries, which is just symbolic of like just take what you need, like leave some for the bears and leave some for other people, and just kind of that philosophy, right? So
That feels like a real
yeah,
nice closing moment of reconciliation too, given that whole
it was
trip. Like,
very powerful. And
yeah.
so, yeah, just coming to shore and being greeted by Cecilia Dick and her sister Lavera. Their father, Pali Dick, was the chief of the Songhe people, and he had just passed days
Mm.
before I arrived. So this was very, very, very special that they came down to the beach to greet me and welcome me at the end of my journey in this way. And very powerful. I mean, see in the film, we walked together to the Mile Zero beacon, and they say, like, to this crowd of people, all as one. And in this very week, these graves are being dug up, behind these residential schools
Mm.
off of Vancouver Island. So again, I just can't emphasize the grace, right?
Yeah.
And the forgiveness, and just this vision of like, wow, what a great
Yeah.
living example of what we must be and what we must now do. So
Yeah.
yeah, very powerful. And then, of course, bringing the feather back home to Haida.
Yeah. 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 Which is a beautiful scene. Um, so, uh, Is there a favorite spot? Is there like a spot that sticks with you still? I know it's a
I
big
think
country and 24,000
it is.
kilometers, but yeah.
You're right. I would say, David, Lake Superior, Gitchigami was like that was that 1,000 kilometer paddle was absolutely life altering, changing, stunning. Yeah, I would have to say
So
that was
powerful that
so
lake,
powerful.
isn't it? Yeah.
So powerful. And just, so if you do that, really encourage people to try to have those opportunities with, the Anishinaabe people because I did ceremony for a week in Agua Park, which isn't really in the film because I wasn't allowed to film it, but you do see me when I go in with the pictographs there. It was in that
The
area of the film.
pictographs,
And
yeah.
then in Mishipacot through the water ceremony. And I mean, these are experiences that not only where you learn something, right? But they gave me necessary things that I needed to know to survive that situation. Like when I got caught out in the night paddle and I couldn't find shore and panic started filling me a little bit in the darkness because I couldn't see anything and the wind was picking up and the canoe started moving around and I had no idea. I started singing that song that those women sang for me at the beach. And when I sang that song, it refocused my energy because I really had to think about it to remember it. It refocused my energy away from the fear. And then my headlamp caught this little tiny white flower and I just was like going in. And, the next morning to see that I was on this spot that's like, just like basically the size of my tent and that I found that place in the dark. It was just nothing, you know what I mean? Just there's magic out there in life. And if you open yourself up to being, just stay humble about the whole thing, man, and just and say thank you. And and I learned a lot of respect for my elders. There's so much respect for elders in Indigenous communities coming home and going like all elders should be respected in this way. And there's something we can all learn from that there too, right?
Yeah.
And respecting my own, my aunts, my uncles, my elders, bringing that level of respect to those relationships. That was I learned that too. We should all know it anyway, but when you're around cultures that really elevate it, you just why aren't I
you
doing
realize
this?
how little we do, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So your premiere is on Friday, and then where can people see this, and what's the plan?
Well, the plan, David, is like I said, I'm very, very, very lucky that I wouldn't have been able to make this film without my partners, which are Paramount Plus in Canada. Ultimately, the film will be streaming on Paramount Plus in Canada, probably by next fall, I would imagine. In the spring, Elevation Pictures has my theatrical rights in Canada, and they're planning a large theatrical release of this documentary, which is amazing. That's a very rare occurrence for a documentary filmmaker like me. So I'm pretty excited by that. We literally just finished the film 10 days ago. I guess if this was like a painting exhibit, you could say that the painting will still be wet when you go to the gallery. So we've just like right into this, but really special that it's in Whistler for me because my very first job as a photographer was as a photojournalist for the Whistler Question back in my 20s and in the early 90s, late 80s, whatever it was. And so it feels kind of full circle. The first time I picked up a camera and now I'm bringing this film back there. It's the premiere. And so that feels really wonderful. And like I said, we got friends coming out from across Canada that are in this film that are showing up. And we have this like incredible soundtrack. I'm pretty proud of the soundtrack. I'm proud of the composer, David Ramos, but also that artists like
Joni
Joni
Mitchell in there,
and
Tragically Hip in there. Yeah, looking for a place to happen. I caught that.
That's right. And Xavier Rudd. I mean, Saltland. We have some really amazing music in this film, and those were almost gifts. In terms of again, a filmmaker like me could never afford something like that. So the fact that those are in this film is just another expression of business kindness.
Awesome. Well, tell us the name of the film again.
500 Days in the Wild.
Go out and see it, everybody. It's definitely worth it. And Dianne, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real
thank you,
real
David.
pleasure having you on this podcast. And thank you for sharing your adventures.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And thanks to all of you for listening. Before you log off, can I ask a quick favor? If you like Explore, can you tell one other person about it? Recommend it to a friend, post about it on social media, talk about one of our episodes at a dinner party, however you want to do it. Please spread the word. It's the best way to bring more listeners to these interviews, and it's much appreciated. Thank you. Also, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, when we'll explore again, I'm David McGuffin.
I think right now we're enjoying very much looking back at the Earth, and it's just a fantastic experience, and I just can't wait to get back and start telling people.
We left Simpson about June 10th with the fur brigade, consisting of a number of yacht boats, each manned by 10 voyageurs.
For us Inuit, it means that Inuit oral history is very strong.
And we flew low over every inch of the country that could be. We were hoping that he would fire at us.
I guess 160